I knew my wife was cheating the moment I found the receipt, but I let her think she was getting away with it for 3 months. The piece of paper was folded neatly in her jacket pocket, a pocket I was checking for tissues because she'd been complaining about allergies all week. Instead of Kleenex, my fingers found thermal paper from the downtown Marriott. Room service for 2. Champagne, strawberries. 2 bathrobes charged to the room. Total, $287.43. Date, Tuesday, March 15th. The same Tuesday she'd texted me about working late on the Henderson account. I stood in our walk-in closet staring at that receipt like it was a death certificate. Because in a way, it was. 14 years of marriage, dead at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening while my wife showered off another man's touch 20 feet away. The smart thing would have been to confront her immediately. The emotional thing would have been to scream, to throw the receipt in her face, to demand explanations she'd never give honestly anyway. But I've always been methodical, strategic. It's what made me successful in commercial real estate, and it's what would make me successful in destroying the life she thought she was so cleverly building behind my back. I photographed the receipt with my phone, then carefully refolded it and placed it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I sat on our bed, where she'd been lying to my face for God knows how long, and began to think. The signs had been there for months, hadn't they? The client dinners that ran impossibly late, the new lingerie I never saw her wear, the way she'd started going to the gym religiously, returning home glowing with an energy that had nothing to do with cardio and everything to do with anticipation. She'd been preparing herself for someone else, sculpting her body for another man's appreciation, while I worked late to pay for her personal trainer. The cruelest part wasn't the sex, it was the performance. Every morning she'd kiss my cheek and ask about my day with the same loving concern she'd perfected over 14 years. Every evening she'd curl up beside me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, playing the devoted wife while planning her next rendezvous. She'd become a stranger wearing my wife's face, and I'd been too trusting, too stupid to notice. But now I knew, and knowledge, properly applied, was power. I'd heard about the Henderson account, of course. Margaret had been working with some hotshot junior partner at Brennan & Associates, a financial services firm downtown. She'd mentioned him a few times. Derek something. Young, ambitious, probably saw my 43-year-old wife as a sophisticated older woman worth impressing. I could picture him. Expensive suit, confident smile, the kind of man who viewed other people's marriages as obstacles rather than boundaries. He probably thought he was clever, stealing another man's wife with champagne and strawberries in hotels I'd probably helped finance through our joint accounts. The shower shut off. Margaret would emerge in 10 minutes, hair wrapped in a towel, skin pink from the heat, and she'd smile at me with those lying lips and ask what I wanted for dinner. But I wouldn't be playing anymore. I'd be watching, learning, gathering intelligence. I pulled up the number for Hartwell Investigations on my phone. Private investigators weren't just for divorce cases anymore. They were for men who understood that information was ammunition, and I intended to build an arsenal. Mr. Hartwell, this is David. I need a consultation regarding my wife's extracurricular activities. I have evidence, but I need documentation. Complete documentation. Money is no object. I hung up and smiled for the first time in months. Margaret thought she was the predator in this marriage, but she'd just become the prey herself. She just didn't know it yet. The bathroom door opened, releasing lavender-scented steam. David, what do you want for dinner tonight? I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. Whatever you'd like, sweetheart. I'm not particularly hungry. Not for food, anyway. But for justice? For revenge? My appetite was ravenous. Michael Hartwell delivered his first report exactly 1 week after our initial consultation, and reading it felt like performing surgery on my own marriage. Every page contained another small death, another confirmation that the woman I'd loved for 14 years had been systematically dismantling our life together while I slept beside her. oblivious. Derek Castellanos, 29 years old, junior partner at Brennan and Associates, former college lacrosse player at Duke, unmarried, ambitious in the way that only comes from growing up with family money and Ivy League connections. The kind of man who probably viewed seducing married women as a sport, complete with scorekeeping and technique refinement. The photographs were clinical in their clarity. Margaret laughing at something Derek said over lunch at Meridian, the upscale restaurant where she'd never taken me despite my suggestions. Margaret's hand covering his across a corner table at Sapphire Lounge, the intimate cocktail bar she'd claimed was too stuffy when I'd wanted to celebrate our anniversary there last year. Margaret walking into the Hampton Inn on 5th Street, Derek following exactly 7 minutes later, a pattern they'd apparently perfected to avoid being seen together. But it was the surveillance video that truly revealed the scope of her deception. Hartwell had managed to capture 23 minutes of footage from the hotel's lobby camera. I watched my wife of 14 years transform into someone I'd never met. Her laugh was different, throatier, more sexual. Her walk was different, a subtle sway that advertised availability. Even her posture was different, shoulders back, chin raised, projecting a confidence she'd never shown me. She was performing femininity for Derek the way actresses perform for cameras, and the performance was flawless. The most damaging evidence wasn't visual, it was temporal. Hartwell had cross-referenced Margaret's claimed work schedule with her actual whereabouts, building a comprehensive timeline of deception. The Henderson account required approximately 6 hours of weekly client interaction. Margaret had been billing nearly 20 hours weekly to Henderson-related activities while spending an average of 14 hours per week in hotels, restaurants, and Derek's downtown apartment. She wasn't just cheating. She was stealing time from our marriage and billing it to her lover like a prostitute with a retainer. The confrontation scene I'd been imagining wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about strategy. Margaret wasn't just betraying our marriage. She was investing in a future that didn't include me. She was building a new life while using our shared assets as startup capital, planning her escape while keeping me as a financial safety net. The divorce attorney I consulted, Patricia Vance, was renowned for her scorched earth approach to matrimonial warfare. Her office walls displayed framed newspaper clippings detailing high-profile cases where she'd decimated unfaithful spouses with surgical precision. "Your wife has been remarkably careless," Patricia observed, spreading the photographs across her conference table like tarot cards predicting doom. The paper trail alone would be sufficient for a fault-based divorce in this state. "I want more than a divorce," I told her. "I want consequences." Patricia smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Then we'll give her consequences." We spent 3 hours mapping strategy. Asset protection came first, quietly moving funds from joint accounts to individual holdings, documenting every shared investment and property acquisition, preparing for the legal battle Margaret didn't know was coming. Patricia recommended a forensic accountant to trace every dollar Margaret had spent on her affair, building a case for reimbursement of marital assets used to fund adultery. "Let her think she's winning," Patricia advised. "Cheaters become overconfident when they believe they're undetected. She'll make mistakes." That evening, I watched her prepare for another client dinner with new eyes. The careful makeup application, the outfit selection, the perfume she'd stopped wearing for me months ago, every detail was a weapon she was sharpening for someone else. "Henderson account again?" I asked, sipping wine while she checked her reflection. "Unfortunately," she sighed, practicing the weary expression she'd perfected. "Derek thinks we can close the deal if we work through some details tonight." Derek. She'd said his name with unconscious familiarity, the way she used to say mine. That slip would have destroyed me 3 months ago. Now it was simply more evidence for Patricia's files. After she left, I poured another glass of wine and opened Hartwell's latest report. Tonight, when Margaret thought she was safest, when she believed her secret was secure, Hartwell's team would be documenting every kiss, every caress, every moment of passion my wife shared with her lover. In 3 weeks, I was going to destroy her world completely. I selected my charcoal Armani for the confrontation, the same suit I'd worn to close the Meridian Tower deal, the same suit Margaret had once called devastatingly handsome. The manila folder containing divorce papers sat on my dresser like a loaded weapon, 47 pages of legal documentation that would transform my wife from partner to adversary with the stroke of a pen. 3 months of surveillance had revealed their pattern with mathematical precision. Every other Wednesday, Margaret would claim a late Henderson account emergency, while Derek would mysteriously cancel his evening appointments. They'd meet at the downtown Marriott, the same hotel where I'd first discovered their affair. Room 847, always room 847. I arrived at the Marriott at 5:30 p.m., 2 hours before their scheduled rendezvous. The lobby lounge provided perfect surveillance angles while maintaining the appearance of a businessman waiting for clients. I ordered Macallan neat and positioned myself with clear sightlines to the elevator bank. At 7:43 p.m., Derek entered through the main entrance wearing confidence like expensive cologne. 6'2", athletic build, the kind of casual arrogance that comes from never facing real consequences. He moved through the lobby like he owned it, probably because he'd been conducting his affairs here long enough to feel proprietary about the space. Margaret appeared at 7:51 p.m., 8 minutes of strategic delay designed to avoid the appearance of coordination. She wore the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she'd claimed was too fancy for anywhere we'd go. Apparently, Derek merited special occasion attire. Watching them reunite near the elevator was like observing wildlife, predators recognizing each other through instinctual signals. Derek's hand found the small of her back immediately, guiding her toward the elevator with practiced familiarity. Margaret laughed at something he whispered, the sound carrying across the lobby with crystalline clarity. They were happy, genuinely, radiantly happy, in a way that illuminated how miserable our marriage had become. Margaret hadn't looked at me with that kind of anticipation in years, hadn't touched my arm with that unconscious intimacy, hadn't smiled with that unguarded joy. The elevator doors closed on their ascending passion. I finished my Macallan, straightened my tie, and began the most important negotiation of my career. 8th floor, down the hallway to room 847. I could hear their voices through the door, Margaret's laugh, Derek's deeper rumble, the clink of champagne glasses. They were celebrating something, probably the thrill of believing they were untouchable. I waited exactly 10 minutes, long enough for them to settle into their ritual, to shed the pretense of business meetings and embrace the reality of their affair. Long enough for them to believe they were safe in their stolen sanctuary. The knock was firm, but not aggressive. Professional. The kind of knock that suggested room service rather than vengeful husbands armed with divorce papers. Footsteps approached the door. A pause while someone checked the peephole. The chain rattled. The deadbolt turned. The door opened 6 inches, revealing Margaret's face framed by the security chain. Her expression cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Curiosity, confusion, recognition, and finally, absolute horror. The color drained from her face as our eyes met through that 6-inch gap. "Hello, Margaret," I said quietly. "We need to talk." Behind her, Derek's voice called out with casual intimacy. "Who is it, babe?" The endearment hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. She was his babe now, his secret girlfriend, his sophisticated older woman. But she was also my wife, wearing my anniversary gift while planning our marriage's destruction in a hotel room charged to our joint credit card. "It's..." Margaret's voice cracked. "It's my husband." The silence from inside the room was deafening. I could picture Derek's face, the exact moment when his fantasy collided with reality. Margaret's hands shook as she fumbled with the security chain. She opened the door wider, revealing herself in the silk robe the hotel provided. Her hair was disheveled, her lips swollen, her face flushed with passion that wasn't meant for me. "David, I can explain," she began. "No need," I interrupted, extending the manila folder with surgical precision. "Everything's explained in here." She took the folder with trembling fingers, her eyes never leaving my face. Behind her, Derek appeared in the doorway wearing nothing but hotel towels and panic. Up close, he looked younger than his 29 years, his face pale with the realization that his sophisticated affair had just become a legal liability. "Divorce papers," I explained conversationally. "Your attorney will want to review them carefully, particularly the sections regarding fault-based proceedings and asset division. Patricia Vance is very thorough." Margaret's knees buckled slightly at the mention of Patricia's name. Derek's face went gray as he processed the implications of being named as co-respondent in a high-profile divorce case. "David, please," Margaret whispered. "Can we discuss this at home?" "We're past private discussions," I replied. "We've been past them for 3 months. Every lie you told, every fabricated work emergency, every passionate evening you spent with Derek while I waited at home believing in our marriage. Patricia has documentation of all of it." The folder slipped from Margaret's numb fingers, papers scattering across the hotel room floor like prophecies of doom. 14 years, I said, my voice carrying down the hallway with absolute clarity. 14 years of marriage, and this is how you chose to end it. I turned and walked away, leaving them both frozen in that doorway, surrounded by scattered legal documents and the wreckage of their carefully constructed fantasy. My footsteps echoed down the hallway with the measured cadence of a man who'd just won the most important victory of his life. The war was over. Margaret just didn't know it yet. Margaret didn't come home until 3:17 a.m., and I was waiting, not dramatically, no sitting in darkness with brandy. I was in my office, reading contracts with the same methodical attention I'd given our marriage's destruction. Work continued, life continued, only Margaret's world had ended. I heard her key in the lock, the careful quiet of someone hoping to avoid confrontation. Her heels clicked softly across our hardwood floors as she tried to navigate to the guest bedroom without waking me. "Margaret." My voice carried through the house with calm authority. "We should talk." She appeared in my office doorway, still wearing that black dress, now wrinkled and stained with tears. Her makeup had long since dissolved, leaving her face raw and exposed. She looked like a woman who'd spent hours arguing with her lover about whose fault it was that their perfect affair had exploded into legal consequences. "David, she began, then stopped. What could she possibly say? "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. The same chair where she'd once helped me review mortgage documents for our house, where we'd planned vacations like the partnership we'd once been. She sat carefully, as if sudden movements might trigger additional catastrophes. Smart woman. Catastrophes were definitely still available. "I've spoken with Patricia," I continued, shuffling through papers with deliberate calm. "The preliminary settlement offer is quite generous, considering the circumstances. You'll receive 15% of our combined assets, the Honda, and 30 days to vacate the premises." Her face went white. 15%? David, that's impossible. I'm entitled to half of everything we built together. "Everything we built together?" I repeated, finally looking up from my papers. "Margaret, you've been stealing from our marriage for 3 months, using our joint accounts to fund your affair. The forensic accountant Patricia hired has traced every expenditure. Restaurants, hotels, gifts, $6,700 in marital assets spent on adultery." Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. She'd never considered the financial implications of her affair, never imagined that romance had a paper trail that accountants could follow like bloodhounds. "And Derek?" I asked conversationally. "How did he react to becoming evidence in a high-profile divorce case?" Her silence was answer enough. Derek had probably retreated faster than Napoleon from Moscow once he realized that seducing married women carried consequences beyond guilty pleasures. "He's not taking my calls," she whispered finally. "Smart man," I observed, though about 6 months too late for that intelligence. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in controlled destruction. Margaret tried every argument: tears, anger, pleading, bargaining. She claimed temporary insanity, midlife crisis, anything that might preserve some fragment of the life she'd systematically demolished. But Patricia had prepared me for this performance. Cheaters always tried to minimize their betrayals once consequences arrived. They'd claim confusion, temporary insanity, love for their spouses despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. "I love you," Margaret finally sobbed. "I know I made mistakes, but I love you. We can work through this." "You love me?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her like a specimen under glass. "Margaret, you've been performing love for months while f***ing another man. You've been kissing me goodnight after spending afternoons in his bed. That's not love. That's sociopathy." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. But truth, like justice, was often violent. By dawn, she'd retreated to the guest bedroom, a refugee in the house she'd helped choose, reduced to camping in spaces that had once been ours together. I could hear her making phone calls, to Derek, who wasn't answering, to her sister, to attorneys, who were probably explaining exactly how f***ed she was legally. The really beautiful part was watching her realize that Derek wasn't coming to rescue her. The man she'd sacrificed our marriage for had disappeared the moment their affair became inconvenient. He'd gotten what he wanted, and now he was protecting his career by cutting her loose like damaged cargo. She'd traded 14 years of marriage for a fantasy that evaporated the moment it encountered reality. Over the following weeks, I watched her lawyer attempt increasingly desperate strategies. Character assassination, claiming I'd been emotionally abusive, suggesting that her affair was somehow my fault. But Patricia had evidence, and evidence trumped narrative every time. The surveillance photographs were particularly devastating in depositions. Watching Margaret's attorney review images of his client passionately kissing another man in hotel lobbies was like watching someone's faith die in real time. By November, Margaret's resistance had crumbled entirely. Her lawyer recommended accepting our settlement offer rather than risking a trial that would destroy what remained of her reputation. She'd moved back to her parents' house in Ohio, a 42-year-old woman starting over with nothing except the memories of a marriage she'd murdered for temporary pleasure. I felt no guilt about her circumstances. She'd made her choices with clear knowledge of potential consequences. She'd simply gambled that I was too weak, too trusting, or too comfortable to call her bluff. She'd gambled wrong. 6 months after signing the final divorce papers, I stood in my new downtown apartment watching the sun set over the city Margaret and I had once planned to grow old in together. The space was modern, minimalist, designed for a man who'd learned to prefer solitude to deception. No shared closets hiding hotel receipts, no joint accounts funding other people's romances, no performance of domestic bliss masking systematic betrayal. Margaret's destruction had been total and precise. Her position at the firm had become untenable once news of the affair spread through professional circles. Derek had transferred to the firm's Seattle office, probably hoping geography could erase his reputation as a homewrecker. Margaret had moved back to Ohio, living with her parents like a teenager who'd made catastrophically bad decisions. I'd heard through mutual friends that she was working at a small regional firm, making perhaps a third of her previous salary. She'd traded everything: career, home, financial security, reputation, for 3 months of hotel room passion with a man who'd abandoned her the moment their affair became inconvenient. The mathematics of betrayal were brutally simple. She'd received exactly what she'd given: nothing. Some nights I'd wonder if I should feel guilty about her comprehensive destruction. Therapy might have been an option. Counseling could have addressed whatever marital problems had driven her to seek excitement elsewhere. A more forgiving man might have attempted reconciliation, but Margaret hadn't chosen therapy or counseling or honest conversation about our marriage's problems. She'd chosen deception, betrayal, and the systematic dismantling of our partnership while maintaining the pretense of love. She'd earned her consequences. The man who'd found that hotel receipt 6 months ago no longer existed. That man had been trusting, optimistic about human nature, willing to assume good faith in others' actions. The man I'd become was harder, more strategic, fundamentally changed by learning that someone I'd loved completely had viewed our marriage as a convenience rather than a commitment. I didn't miss the old version of myself. Naivety was expensive. Trust without verification was dangerous. Love without reciprocity was exploitation masquerading as partnership. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, the real estate attorney I'd been seeing for the past month. Dinner reservations at Meridian, the restaurant where Margaret had courted her lover while lying to me about working late. I'd chosen Meridian because the food was excellent, and I refused to let my ex-wife's betrayals limit my own experiences. Margaret had made her choices, faced her consequences, and disappeared into the life she'd built from the ashes of our marriage. I'd made my choices, engineered her consequences, and moved forward into a future uncontaminated by her deceptions. Some betrayals were so complete, so systematic, so contemptuous of their victims that they required equally complete responses. Margaret had declared war on our marriage through months of calculated lies. I'd simply ensured she lost that war as completely as she deserved to lose it. Tomorrow would bring new deals, new possibilities, new relationships built on honesty rather than performance. The future stretched ahead like an empty canvas, unmarked by other people's betrayals or my own naive assumptions about human nature. I closed the blinds, straightened my tie, and headed out to dinner with a woman who'd never seen me as anything other than exactly who I was. No lies, no performances, no hidden agendas. Just the truth. Finally, beautifully, completely the truth. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.